Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 190. Half a Life.
Renew. You're listening to Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm John Champion. Each week, we do real-life experiments on you, the unsuspecting audience, seeing what happens when we examine an episode of Star Trek for messages, morals, and meanings, and see whether each stands the test of time.
This week, Half a Life, the one where Frank Burns' replacement is rushing to meet his maker. That doesn't ring a bell? Okay, how about this? It is the most enjoyable Lwaxana Troi episode so far. Still nothing? Well, just listen. In a moment, John's going to do half a life of trivia, but first, I'm going to tell you how to get in touch with us. Mission Log Pod is the address to find us on Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. If you want to leave us a voicemail, you can. Our phone number is 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our show website, including discovered documents and pictures and places to leave comments, is missionlogpodcast.com. And please do remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. And with half an intro out of the way, it's time for Half a Life of Trivia.
Right, today's trivia. Today's episode was written by Ted Roberts and Peter Allen Fields, with the teleplay by Peter Allen Fields. Now, Ted Roberts is actually a very accomplished music editor and supervisor with credits that range from V to Galactica 1980 to The Untouchables, the TV series, and the Perry Mason TV movies from the 90s. This is actually his only script story credit. Peter Allen Fields, on the other hand, is a greatly experienced TV writer and producer. He started out writing on The Man from U.N.C.L.E., 11 episodes there, including a couple of my favorites, The Girls of Nazarone Affair and The Ultimate Computer Affair.
The Ultimate Computer Affair!
I did that for you, Ken.
Thank you very much.
Later on, he wrote for The $6 Million Man, on which he was also a story consultant, executive story consultant, no less, a role that he will take on later in The Next Generation, and he moved on later to work on Deep Space Nine as well. Now, this show was written partly with the purpose of adding some new dimension to the Lwaxana Troi character. So that was definitely a guiding principle in the development of the script. But a lot of the story influences for this episode, well, there were more than a few, but two of the ones that I really wanted to point out, Pebble in the Sky by Isaac Asimov, same premise of death at 60, but in his, it was on Earth. And there was an unfilmed episode of The Twilight Zone written by Rod Serling called The Happy Place. That was actually going to be the pilot episode of The Twilight Zone, but CBS nixed it as being too depressing. Gosh, I wonder why. And today's episode is directed by Les Landau, who we have seen as a veteran of many Next Gen episodes. Now, this is the first episode that Dennis McCarthy was on board as the music supervisor since the ousting of Ron Jones. This episode's only Emmy nomination was for the original score. And just scientifically, a little bit of background here. The sun is a big part of the show. Well, somebody's sun, not ours in particular. But let's put it into a little context. Our sun is about 4.6 billion years old. And at the center, under immense pressure, hydrogen atoms are fused to make helium atoms. And this is happening in temperatures up to about 28 million degrees Fahrenheit, or about 15.7 million degrees Kelvin. Then layer by layer, it gets a little cooler. You got 3.5 million degrees, then 10,000 degrees, and 7,800 degrees. And then it gets hotter again at the corona, about 3.5 million degrees. So I told you all of that because that leads into the research notes that came back on this episode. There were a lot of them. So mostly to do with the plot contrivance of a dying sun. One of the researchers actually suggested that having the sun being unstable rather than a dying star would be a better idea, since a dying sun would actually take tens of thousands of years to have a bad effect on nearby planets. They also suggested that the idea of a photon torpedo being used should be changed for something else, that Timicin, they suggested, would bring on some kind of energy converter, and then what Geordi needed to do was to engineer a way to keep the torpedoes cool while delivering the payload. Finally, the researcher said the temperature scale is way off And they suggested using those numbers like 219, 220 as percentages rather than measurements of degrees or millions degrees Kelvin. Obviously, in this case, all those notes from research were just ignored for the final script. So you can only do so much.
Well, what's funny to me is there was only, so all of that you just said, there was only one thing that took me out of it scientifically.
What's that?
The fact that we knew inside of 30 seconds whether it was working. It's like, oh, it's working, and it's good. Oh, wait, no, it's bad. Right. It turns out not. Oh, okay, really? And that's like 40 years of work. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
I've been working for a long time. I'll continue to work for quite a while, I would imagine. I'm really glad that nothing in what I'm doing is going to come down to 30 seconds.
Yeah, right.
Man, that's a gamble, you know?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about the guest stars on today's show. Of course, we have Majel Barrett Roddenberry back as Loxana. Now, I found Majel's copy of this script with her notes in it. Nothing too explosive to post here or that we would put on our website. But she had some interesting acting notes to herself, like maybe a cue about a line read. You know, here she's bragging, or here she's laying off Picard, like give him a little bit of space. The funniest one was on her beam-in at the beginning of the episode, she just wrote, "Here's Johnny," as sort of her read for her introductory line. Interestingly, she had a page of notes, shooting dates and scene numbers really stuck into the back of her script, and that was on letterhead from a show called Spectre. That was the name of a TV pilot from 1977 that she appeared in. It was written by Gene Roddenberry and Sam Peebles. So clearly she just took a piece of old stationery from that show that she appeared in and used that to take notes for the shooting schedule for this episode of Next Gen, and that's still in her script.
Let me ask you a question really quickly. She didn't transport in. She met up with Picard in the hallway. Now I can sort of see the "here's Johnny" thing, because she does like the big arms. She has really big arms on that.
Yes.
Was there a beam-in originally, and they just like, why?
Looking at the version that I saw, unless I'm conflating two moments, but looking at the version that I saw, there's actually an entrance with her coming into greet Picard, and I believe it says transporter room on that.
They're on their way to the transporter.
They are on their way, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But,
it'd be weird if she like beamed in and then they went out in the hall and then they came back in.
Very true. I might be conflating that with a different version. There are about 4 versions floating around. But yeah, in that particular one, she writes as her line read, "Here's Johnny."
That's cute.
So, yeah.
And I can totally see that on the screen, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, we also have Carol Stroiken back as Mr. Hom, of course. And we have some new faces. We have Terrence B. McNally as Batardat. Terrence got his start in some small TV roles in the 70s, including guest starring on The Amazing Spider-Man, The Love Boat, Mork and Mindy. He went on to roles in movies like 9 to 5, the awesome Roger Corman film Battle Beyond the Stars, and then later on Earth Girls Are Easy. He was married to Julie Brown, and that's comedian Julie Brown, not Downtown, in case you're keeping score at home.
Did they meet on Earth Girls Are Easy?
I would imagine they would, because
or
where
did
else?
One get the job because of the other?
I think they met on that step, but I didn't dig that deeply into their past. But when we have our Julie Brown podcast, we'll get all the details.
I am so working on my Michelle Forbes podcast, though.
Absolutely. Well, Michelle Forbes as Dara.
Yeah.
Now, Michelle got her start in soap operas, and we also mentioned once a movie that she was in called California and how that creeped you out, and you'll never watch it again. And soon after that, made this appearance on Star Trek. Now, a lot more work followed, including Seinfeld, The Outer Limits, 24, True Blood, and a great turn on the new Battlestar Galactica. Now, of course, she will be back in a different role on Star Trek, so we can and will talk more about her then. We also have, of course, David Ogden Stiers as Timicin. Like last week, here's a guest star whose resume is really hard to overstate. David is from Illinois. He moved to Oregon. Then he studied acting in New York at the Juilliard and John Houseman's acting school later on. He racked up a number of theater credits and started in TV with an appearance on Kojak. Now, right before that, though, he loaned his voice to a little film called THX 1138, made by a guy fresh out of school, George Lucas. Many more roles followed, but of course it was his portrayal of Major Charles Winchester on MASH for 131 episodes that put him on the map. Since then, he appeared in North and South, Murder, She Wrote, and has used his voice talents in a huge number of animated projects, including more than 24 Disney productions. Interesting to note that Stiers typically plays older than he really is on camera. He was just 35 when he started on MASH, and he was just 48 when this episode of Star Trek was made. And there's a fun tribute in this episode to his character on MASH. One of the computer consoles that he uses features the number 4077 very prominently. So if you look for that, you can freeze frame. Well, you don't have to freeze frame. It's on for a good length of time on the screen.
This episode starts with a head fake. You think it is going to be a Lwaxana episode. And it is. At the same time, it is not.
Prologue. The show opens with Deanna Troy's personal log. Her mother is on board. The sensible Jean-Luc Picard is trying his best to hide from Lwaxana Troi, but she's telepathic, so... yeah. She accompanies the captain to the transporter room where he is welcoming the leading scientist from Kaylon 2, Dr. Timicin. You see, Timicin's people are sort of reclusive, practically xenophobic. Still, Lwaxana joins the welcoming committee, then basically becomes the welcoming committee. She'll show Timicin everything, and spoiler alert, I do mean everything. Act 1. What is a race of xenophobes doing dealing with an outfit as diverse as the Federation? The sun around which Kaylon 2 orbits is dying. Timicin and his people have been working on a possible solution for years, and the Enterprise will help him test a potentially workable solution on an actual star. He's really grateful for the help. You see, Timicin has been working on this problem for 40 years. All he's worked and hoped for has been to find a way to revitalize his planet's sun before he dies. Leaving the conference room, why, it's Lwaxana. She's been waiting for Timicin, waiting to show him everything. She's ushered off the bridge, not before making a slew of passes at the visiting scientist, who seems to be warming to Lwaxana's advances. He'd have never thought Lwaxana old enough to be Deanna's mother. She's so vibrant. She's also in serious pursuit, bringing a picnic to engineering, making small talk, sussing out pertinent information like, is Timicin married, and is Timicin married? The answer would seem to be yes when he mentions his grown daughter, but you see, Timicin's wife died years ago. Well, all that's left now is to show him everything. Lwaxana invites Timicin to her place, and Timicin declines. He wishes he could accept, but he must say no. Act 2. As Timicin prepares for his star revitalization test, Lwaxana prepares for Timicin, wondering which outfit would most impress him. Deanna is surprised her mother hasn't just beta-zetted his brain to figure that out, but she can't. You see, Timicin, and presumably his people, are impervious to her telepathy. In engineering, Timicin's test works, right up until it doesn't. They revitalize the test star, kind of like giving a drowsy person a cup of coffee. Then the heart of the star explodes, followed by the rest of it, kind of like giving a drowsy person 3 gallons of coffee, 5 shots of espresso, and lots of cocaine. The Enterprise gets away just as the star explodes, headed back to Kaylon 2. A distraught Timicin thanks the Enterprise and its crew for all of their assistance, then does what any sensible person would do, heads to a bar. Lwaxana finds Timicin in 10 forward. She makes flirtatious small talk with him, then, thinking it's not going well, tries to make a tactful exit. There really is a first time for everything. Amazingly, though, she's read the situation wrong. Timicin asks her to stay. He wanted to tell her that he wishes they'd met years ago. She asks what difference a few years make, but it turns out in this case, quite a big difference. You see, Timicin is on his way back to Kaylon 2 to die. Act 3. Back at Kaylon 2, the Enterprise has established contact with Science Minister Batardet. Picard and Riker give him the lowdown on the star test. It worked! Right up until it didn't. But Dr. Timicin can probably make a few adjustments, and the Enterprise will be happy to stick around until he's ready to perform another test. But Batardet says that won't be necessary. You see, Timicin has obligations at home. Thanks for your help. Please get our scientists back to us as soon as possible. No sooner has the call ended than Lwaxana comes in to read Picard the riot act. She's learned something interesting/infuriating about Kaylon 2. When people there turn 60, they kill themselves. Friends and family gather, celebrate the soon-to-be departed's life, share a smoke, make a joke. Then the person being feted completes the resolution, which means they kill themselves. Knowing that Timicin is about to complete the resolution himself, Lwaxana has done the sensible thing. She's come to Picard. He'll obviously do the sensible thing and stop all of this from happening. Except he can't. No matter what his personal feelings are, the Prime Directive forbids him from interfering with the social order of any planet. Lwaxana storms out of the captain's ready room, saying that that's his Prime Directive, not hers. Picard calls Counselor Troy, who catches up with her mother in the transporter room, yelling at O'Brien to beam her down to Kaylon 2 so that she can give them a piece of her mind. Of course, O'Brien can't. He beats a retreat as Lwaxana falls apart in her daughter's arms. She can't take what she sees as the senselessness of this situation. There's nothing wrong with Timicin. He's just going to die because his society says he's too old. And Deanna may not have noticed, but Lwaxana also kind of likes Timicin. She's also afraid on some level that she'll outlive her own usefulness, though Deanna assures her mother that she won't be someone who dies before she dies. Having pulled herself together, Lwaxana pays Timicin a visit. He may well be one of those people who die saying, "I wish I'd spent more time at work." He's poring over the test results, trying to figure out what went wrong, though his train of thought is derailed when Lwaxana wraps him in an embrace. He tells her that she's a kind woman, though she says actually she's hateful. She hates what he's going to do, and she hates him for doing it. He says it's the way of his world. He wishes she could accept that. She says she never will. Never. Then they make out. It's between Acts 3 and Acts 4 that she shows Timicin everything. You see, Timicin, everything. Act 4. Timicin wakes to find Lwaxana staring at him, not in a creepy way. He explains to her the why of the resolution. 15 to 20 centuries ago, there was no resolution. Old people became a drain on their descendants and on society. They were sent to live or die in death watch facilities, in loneliness, sometimes for years. They'd meant something once, then they didn't anymore. They lived knowing that they did so at the expense of the younger generations. They're no longer that cruel. Yeah, Lwaxana's not buying it. While Timicin says the resolution is a celebration of life, allowing people to finish their time with dignity, Lwaxana says they got rid of the problem by getting rid of the people. She says it is the job of the younger generation to take care of the older generation, just as the older generation took care of the younger generation when they were starting out. Timicin says parents should not expect to be paid back for the love they showed their kids, though Lwaxana disagrees. But that argument can be shelved. There are plenty more. Timicin still has a ton to offer. It's insane that that's going to be snuffed out. Lots of people can have lots to offer at 70 years old, 80 years old. Others might be spent in their 50s. Timicin says having people decide when their family members should die, that would be cruel. And Lwaxana agrees. Why not just let people die when they die? Timicin says this is his people's tradition. Lwaxana tells a story about an old Beta Z tradition. Women used to wear caged animals on their heads. Started as a fashion thing, then became a tradition. This went on for years until one day one woman said she wasn't going to keep doing that, and soon that tradition was done. Time now to go for the throat. Kaylon 2 has what, 30, 40 years left? What if the scientists who come after Timicin can't save their son? What chance does Timicin's grandson have of reaching 60 himself? And with that, Timicin will hear no more on the subject. It is his time, and that is the way it is. Well, says Lwaxana, if that's the way it is, why bother trying to save the planet? Maybe its time has come as well. With days, maybe only hours left, Timicin can't stop trying to figure out what went wrong with the star test. And then he does it. He thinks he can get it right. He just needs more time. Only one thing to do. Timicin goes to Captain Picard and requests asylum aboard the Enterprise. Act 5. Communicating with Kaylon 2, Picard, it's like, what? Everybody's getting together for your resolution. There's going to be cake. Timicin says he thinks it's time for Kaelon society to re-examine the wisdom of the resolution. Is somebody putting you up to this? Both Timicin and Picard say Timicin is making the decision on his own. The Petardats not buying that. No way a guy like Timicin would reject his culture. On the off chance he is, though, 2 Kaelon warships are now flanking the Enterprise. Betardat says if the ship tries to leave with Timicin on board, the warships have been given the go-ahead to open fire. Betardat out. Well, Timicin will just keep working for his planet's good, regardless of whether they want it. But they really don't want it. They're refusing to hear his new ideas and have effectively cut him off from his work. Alive, I am a greater threat to my world than a dying sun. Timicin starts to hash out a situation with Lwaxana. She makes him want to live, to keep working. He sees that he has more to offer. But what good will it do if he can't keep working? If he can't go home? This moment interrupted by a call from Commander Riker. Timicin has a guest. It's his daughter. She just beamed up to say how ashamed she is of her father. To his face. In front of his new girlfriend. He says he has more work to do, but she says his work is done. He taught her the value of the resolution. It's time for him to rest. Otherwise, where will he go? And where will he die? His daughter leaves, and Timicin tells Lwaxana that he would like to be alone. Lwaxana spends their time apart talking over her uncertainty with Deanna. She's not sure that the way she counseled Timicin was right, that she wasn't just being selfish. Doesn't really matter, though. Timicin comes to tell her he's made his decision. While Lwaxana is almost enough to make him keep going, she's only almost enough. He does love her, but that can't be his only reason for living. He's not the person to lead the revolt. One to beam down, though at the last minute Timicin is joined by Lwaxana. She'll attend the resolution, with his permission, and Picard's. She promises not to make any trouble. And with that, hand in hand, it's 2 to beam down to the end.
I can't. Let's just call it a day.
You wanna?
We could.
Yeah.
We could. It's so... this is so heartbreaking and beautifully told. And then I'm kind of in the same position that I was last week, where you try to sort of decompress a little during this segment after something really heavy and really thoughtful. This one, totally emotional. Last week's was this intellectual ride.
Yeah.
You know? And then this week is this totally emotional ride.
Well, with a good bit of intellect as well.
A wonderful intellect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how about I start with something completely stupid?
Please.
You just get to blow up stars? Really?
Oh, rank has its privileges. Yes.
So it's also interesting. It's also interesting that Picard says, yeah, so, the test was mostly good, except for the part where the star blew up. But tell you what we can do. We can just hang around while he makes his adjustments.
And they'll go do it again.
Except that they actually said that it took them 3 years to find the star in a similar situation. Because here's the thing. You're not just looking for the same class of star. You're also looking for one that's winking out the same way that the one that they're orbiting is.
Right.
Now, granted, the Big Bang happened for everything all at once, I suppose. And so I guess it may be, there could be another star. Maybe there's a bunch of stars that are like that. They got a shelf life of 4.9 billion years, 8.2 billion maybe. Who knows? Maybe there are a bunch that are expiring at the same time. It's like when you go to that old market, that almost nobody stocks, and you realize that all of the milk expired on the same day 1 month ago.
Sure.
Maybe it's like that.
Yeah, maybe.
How's that for stupid?
Well, that was pretty stupid. But it's an interesting idea. So they have to go find a star, and you have to find it where it won't affect anything else.
Right.
Which I would find pretty hard to believe, because stars are so massive and have such gravitational pull. They pretty much affect other bodies in the universe, no matter what, So, good luck finding another star.
And I quote Pavel Chekhov. Does it have to be completely lifeless?
Nice.
There's so many different things that could figure into this, not the least of which is, remember that little... we haven't seen it yet. I hear tell of a movie where there's this race of people who live at the base of a volcano. So let's say they happen to be looking up at the star at that point, in the sky rather, and they see a star just wink out of existence.
Yeah, and then they're like, huh.
Where be your prime directive now? Because you probably just screwed something entirely up for some, Mr. Ugg and his crew.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I do want to sort of get out of the way pretty early that I think any discussion here about the prime directive for this episode is pretty clear cut, at least as far as the A plot goes.
Yeah.
Picard lays it out pretty clearly, and people sometimes write in and ask us, why didn't you talk about the prime directive here? Well, because it's pretty clear cut.
Yeah.
And I don't really have any argument with what Picard says. So, I'll leave it at that. By the way, every time I was writing notes for this and I was writing Timicin, I kept writing Tim Minchin, who I think I've talked about before. He's a singer-songwriter who does really funny stuff. Look him up. But they're very close. And I kept saying that in my head and typing it as I would type out Timicin.
Well, you know what I was thinking really quickly about the whole Timicin thing, and you may have picked up on it. There's never going to be a Timmy.
No,
Star Trek.
That's the closest we got.
Yeah, so I figured you see Timicin is the closest I'm ever going to have to actually really say that and have it mean anything.
I'm really glad you did that.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I'm also really glad that you mentioned Logan's Run at the very top of our show, just in case the people who have pop culture references after 1983, unlike us. The original Logan's Run novel, written in the 60s by William F. Nolan, and then made into a movie in 1976, which was awesome. But in that book, or the movie, whichever one you want to take a look at first, the future Earth society that lives in this domed city, they've all agreed that in the book, life ends at 21. In the movie, it's 30. Well, because you have better actors when they're over 21. And that's also run by the computer. So there's some other parallels to this here. Although I mentioned the stories that I mentioned in trivia because those were more direct influences, a little closer to the idea here. Before we get into much else, can we just stop and say that, man, David Ogden Stiers is so good.
Yeah, he is.
Just so good. I remember seeing this the first time and just thinking, oh, cool, it's the guy from MASH. But his performance is so riveting and understated. Man, that scene... well, pretty much every scene that he's in, but that scene after the experiment with the sun fails, fantastic. And it's everything in that and the scene right after when he's in 10 Forward. It's all the stuff that he can't say, which is terrific and really made it a pleasure to watch this time after time after time.
Well, and as difficult as the scene was as well, I mean, when he's sitting there crying... after Michelle Forbes leaves, after Dara, his daughter, leaves. I mean, it's so weird. I was trying to think of something else that I've seen like that on TV lately. And I don't watch a lot of TV, I'll grant you. But I just can't think of anything where, I mean, he was just so emotionally out there in that scene. Yeah, it really is. I mean, just tremendous. I mean, we talk all the time about what a great actor Patrick Stewart is, and Patrick Stewart is a great actor. This was great acting in a very different way. I mean, he's not crying. He's crying. I mean, he's just. I mean, it's. I can only think of a couple of TV actors who've done anything that I've seen like that. It was truly amazing.
It's a very different thing watching he's got a couple of breakdowns in that sense. It's a very different thing watching that versus Loaxana's breakdown in the transporter room. Or
even, I mean, do Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart's breakdown, I can't remember when we saw it, but I know we've seen Patrick Stewart. Maybe it's coming up. I can't remember. But
well, in Family,
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, his breakdown is a very different thing. And I'm not saying it's any less powerful, except I think I might actually say it is less powerful because, I mean... David Ogden Stiers, I mean, all of a sudden it's just there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no lead up to it.
Yeah.
It's just he's broken, and you don't even realize it until there are pieces laying there.
Right. Incredible.
I will say one other thing about him, though. He spends the rest of the episode trying to figure out what it is that went wrong exactly. He also says that he's been working on coming up with the right programming for Starfleet's photon torpedoes for 40 years, and this raised a few questions for me. We're going back to something dumb, by the way.
Okay, good.
How did his planet that doesn't talk to anybody get information on Starfleet's photon torpedoes? And then also, has photon torpedo development just stopped over the last 40 years? Or do they have an old operating system they run? Is it keeping a copy of Windows 95 or Mac OS 7 around in case somebody has something that they have to run. Like the place I used to work in San Francisco had this like beautiful, absolute state-of-the-art facility with a Mac Pro G3 running OS 9, I think, because they had spent so much money on plugins for Final Cut.
Oh, right.
And so they're like, well, we're not going to spend that thousands of dollars again. So we'll bring people to this thing that looks like it should be the bridge of the Enterprise running Windows XP.
I also wonder how that conversation went. You know, Starfleet shows up 40 plus years ago and they have a little bit of a chat and they say, well, we don't want to share anything with you culturally at all. We're not going to tell you about our life rituals and how we live and how we die. But about those torpedoes you've
exactly. Can we have those? Can we get some
schematics?
Yeah.
You know,
just tell us how those work.
Yeah.
Because we want to monkey with them a bit. Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, no, sure, absolutely no problem, Timicin Sr. And we'll be back in like 31, 32 years. I feel certain we'll see you then.
Yeah.
You might meet my kid.
Yeah, don't bother looking me up.
Exactly.
Yeah. That lunch scene in engineering where Lwaxana shows up and just interrupts their meeting. First of all, Data's line about eating seriously overdone. It was sort of like Data written by amateurs.
Yeah.
You know, where it's, oh, well, he's the android. Let's just put a lot of words in his mouth. I cringed when I saw Lwaxana knock all their work on the floor. I thought for sure security would get called.
I thought iPads everywhere.
Well, thank God it's carpeted.
Yeah, that's true.
You know?
And plus, they've got sort of like what are those really ugly cases that are also really good? OtterBox. It's like they got OtterBoxes on every pad. Exactly.
Yeah,
which I guess with her on board is a good thing.
Yeah. When you can replicate them for free, then why not?
That's true. That's true.
Interesting. I think we're going to hit a lot of the interesting lines in this show, but Timicin has one. It is our home if Kalon 2 ceases to exist, and so do we as a people. And I thought, it's a noble thought, but then to what end? And then I guess I thought, well, we know the end. we know that they kind of fetishize death in this weird way. So, I kind of get it. I mean, I think our reaction would be a little bit different if we knew that our sun was going to burn out, not in 10 billion years, but even in 10,000 years, we might be a little more concerned about that and think, you know what, it's been a good run here.
10,000 years? Seriously? Seriously, you think so?
Well, no.
Have you met humans? We're going to get down to 50 years before we're like, we should seriously think about moving.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe looking around for a place.
Deanna has that line there. They're standing in Lwaxana's quarters, and she's trying on dresses, and they're talking not telepathically, and
no, they are talking telepathically.
They are talking telepathically, and then Deanna says, "We're not alone, Mother." And I thought that look that Lwaxana gives Mr. Hom, she thinks of him as furniture.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really sad. I feel bad for Mr. Hom. Does Lwaxana expect to be paid back for the love she has shown to Deanna? Because her dialogue... Let's think about this for just a moment her dialogue with Timicin...
We're going to think about it here, or we're going to think about it next segment?
Well, we can think about it next segment. I think we have other things to talk about next segment. But
this is like a next segment kind of thing, though, isn't it?
All right. Well, we can bring it back for next segment.
All right.
But I thought, man, she's inviting just a world of hurt by expecting that, by even expressing that.
Yeah.
So there was an interesting bit of Deanna and Lwaxana dialogue when Lwaxana is sort of indicating her feelings for Timicin. And she says that he's the right species for everything else, though, except for telepathy, meaning you ought to try that. And Deanna says, you're not just incorrigible, you're insatiable. Mm-hmm. And they're talking about her sex life, in case you didn't know. Yes.
Wait a minute, what?
And I know.
I thought they were talking about the fact that she was hungry and also just went wherever she wanted to.
Well, that too.
Okay.
She does that too. But it's, and I kept thinking it's not just that Deanna and Lwaxana in this case talk pretty openly about sex. It made me wonder how anyone keeps a personal life on Beta Z. Mm-hmm. Parents, kids, teachers, students, anyone really, anyone at any time, really. There are probably some big benefits to that level of transparency and some huge downsides, like a conversation that Deanna might have awkwardly with her mother about her mother's love life.
Well, no, they talked about this in Tin Man, actually. What was the guy from Dear John? I can't remember the character's name. Gamtu was the name of the spacefaring creature that he was going to talk to, but I can't remember his name.
Right. He was on Dear John? I didn't... Oh, right. Didn't remember that.
But I can't remember his name. Anyway, that guy, I mean, the problem with him was his sort of telepathic ability did not develop gradually the way it does with most kids.
Yeah.
It was like turned on at birth. And so he can't like block all of that out.
Yeah.
Everybody else
can.
can.
To spend a lot of time blocking.
Yeah. Well,
blocking like crazy.
He apparently just doesn't know how to.
Yeah.
My point is, Star Trek has actually answered this question for you already, John.
Okay, well,
go back and watch.
It still sounds awkward. It still sounds terribly awkward.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
I thought that the Kahlon ceremony sounds a lot like a living funeral. See also Tuesdays with Maury.
Or McNulty's send off on The Wire.
I've never watched The Wire.
Really?
Yeah, no,
dude,
never watched it.
Get off the phone right now.
Okay.
Stop doing what you're doing and go watch The Wire.
I guess it's a new podcast, then we'll have to do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
There should be like 5 of those. And yes.
Yeah. Last question. What is the medical research industry like on Kahlon 2?
My guess is it stopped at Viagra.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because there's really not much worry past a certain point, right?
No.
Yes.
Hey, we could work on cancer, which is sort of a naturally occurring part of the aging process as, cells divide. Yeah. But we'll stop with Viagra.
Right. If you're having this problem, consult your doctor. Unless you're 58. In which case...
There is no sense in rewriting an episode that is decades old, but I will anyway. It would have been interesting to find out what Worf thought of the resolution. Also, I am fine not knowing what Riker thought about it.
I was so good earlier at the stupid stuff. Do you mind if I just continue that role? Because I got one thing that I thought of in this episode.
Sure.
All right. There's a tech point here that I would like to make. As great as the cloud is... a physical backup can be your best friend. I found myself wondering why Timicin wouldn't just, go on living, go on doing what it is he's going to do, because he's got the photon torpedoes, he's on the Enterprise, and he's got the sun, he's on the Enterprise. He could go on working for his planet's betterment. He obviously does not need his planet to save his planet, but he does need the work that he saved on the planet to save the planet. A physical backup can be your best friend.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
That's actually a pretty good idea. As you were saying that, I was just thinking another thing that had this episode been made in 1968, and if it was Kirk, he would have had McCoy use the same stuff that knocked Kirk out during amok time. They would have had the ceremony, and then they would have beamed him up surreptitiously from Kahlon 2.
That's true.
So he would have violated the Prime Directive, but he would have done it secretly and cleverly.
Yes. I got to say, forgive me, I don't mean to, depending though, we joked in our Amok Time podcast about, lucky they don't do anything to the body as soon as you die. After, whatever that's called. What is that called?
What
the fight? I can't remember.
The fight, the ritual. Right. So I'm not gonna hum the music.
Yeah, after they have the ritual fight. I mean, my joke was, good thing they didn't, cut off his head and put it on a stick, to show everybody how great Stan is at that point.
Right.
I did find myself in a fairly grisly way wondering how it is, because they talk about how beautiful the resolution is. How does it end?
Yeah, I sort of don't want to know. Now, I also thought it might be part of their cultural and technological exchange program with Eminiar, and they've got a couple of those disintegration booths.
Could well be.
See you, Timicin. Just push the the red button. No, not the other button. Push the red button. Nice. All right, we'll see you.
Gallows humor, ladies and gentlemen. Ask for more.
Yeah, there's so much here, and there's a little bit of an exploration here about customs and cultural relativism, the judgment that Lwaxana has about the traditions on Kahlon 2, and then the judgment that Timicin and Dara have about people who are not part of their culture. I like Loaxana's point about the caged animal wigs, which, by the way, I hope I see on a costume one day, which were fashion, and then the fashion became tradition, and then that got stopped just because somebody had to stop it finally.
Yeah.
And there is something about people who just sort of go along with a thing because it's the thing to go along with, not because it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Now, when I had a job that required a necktie, I thought about that every day.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously,
I bet.
Just made me insane.
Yeah.
Like, and all of this is because somebody a long time ago thought, "Wouldn't it be neat?"
Mm-hmm.
And now I got to do this, and so now I don't.
Yeah, but but that changes here. 100 years ago, everybody had a hat.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, when you have a president like John Kennedy who didn't wear hats, well, not wearing hats became fashionable. So that it changes, but it changes slowly. But something like this sounds like it's going to take a lot longer to change. I wonder that for all the people on the Enterprise who are proud of the fact that their work is their life,
mm-hmm.
I wondered if Timicin gave them any pause. He's looking at his work, saying it is his life, and now his life is over. And even in that last remaining days, just a matter of a few days, he's still thinking about, well, I can work on this, I can work on that, I can work on this. And people are telling him, no, all you need to do is just come back and not do that because your friends and family are coming. And I wondered if for all of these people who just spend their time doing nothing but work, thinking nothing of work, they see a guy like this and they think, wow, I don't want to get down to the last 2 days of my life and thinking I haven't fulfilled everything that I want to do, personally, as well as professionally. I know.
I do and I don't. I had somebody ask me recently how I was doing, and I immediately started talking about this new project that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, that's what you're doing. That's not how you're doing. And as a matter of fact, it was how I was doing at the time. There's stuff, whatever, going on over the past couple of months as we record this. Mm-hmm. And one of the only things that's really taken my head out of it is this new project that I have. And I guess I'm supposed to say, but I shouldn't be focusing on work. I should be focusing on, something else. I think there's a difference. People who say glibly, nobody died saying, I wish I had spent more time at the office.
Sure.
If you're like a cog in that machine, if you're just, out there working for the man,
right.
then I'm kind of there. The thing that I'm working on is a creation of my own devising, right? I mean, there are other people helping, there are other things going into it, but I'm making something. Timicin is working to save his planet. I would imagine that there are plenty of artists. I would imagine that there are plenty of scientists. I would imagine that there are plenty of writers. I would imagine there are plenty of people who have sort of, big or small, have sort of become captains of their own ships, right? Mm-hmm. And they're going to want to die at the helm.
Yeah.
They're going to want to keep doing that. I think there is a level, and maybe I'm just justifying my own existence, but I think there is a level where working until the end, I mean, if that's what you've done, I mean, as opposed to trying to figure out, how to save 3 cents on an inch of pipe, as opposed to trying to figure out, well, if we eliminate jobs from those people, then we could actually save more money. Nurse, get me a phone because I have to call and tell them at work that I have figured out how to make them look better. I mean, I think there are degrees of this, I guess is what I would say.
It's interesting that you thought of other episodes. I thought of Sarek pretty frequently throughout watching this episode. Mm-hmm. There was that line that Loaxana had. His society just decided that he's too old, so they just dispose of him. We had a similar talk about Sarek, about the idea of just being old and then therefore feeling useless or being useless. And then I like that Deanna comes back with this line, you will never be one of those who dies before they die. Mm-hmm. Who stops being vital, who stops being a contributor. But I can imagine, and I can certainly understand, that is a very real fear, and that's a really profound fear, to not be in control enough to be able to keep contributing, maybe not in the same way, but in some way, the way that you have throughout your younger life. this is the most interesting part of the discussion after Lwaxana and Timicin's night together, talking about the history of old people on Kalan 2 made to live their last years in care facilities. Mm-hmm. He says they had meant something and they were forced to live beyond that. Which I do wonder, forced, was there some ban on suicide or other ways that they might not be forced to live that way? That sounds like a horrific way to live. And he says, she says, we're no longer that cruel. He says we're no longer that cruel, exactly. But I wonder if that decision to end all lives at 60 years means that they didn't try to do better. What was the cutoff other than just deciding, well, 60 years, that's a good long lifespan. Pretty much anything over that, the rates of disease go up and the rates of dementia and whatever. So 60 years is a good long run. And she says, well, what about the responsibility of caring for the elderly, mm-hmm. which I thought was a great comeback to that. Timicin makes an interesting argument. The elderly shouldn't force their children into that role. And Lwaxana argues that they should, or at least why not, that they shouldn't. All of this is, I thought, one of the best moments in the whole show because they're laying out really excellent arguments for both sides here. This isn't one of those the original series kind of episodes where it's just sort of Kirk, talking the opposition to death. Yeah, I wonder though if you were supposed to think that they were laying out excellent arguments for both sides. I don't see how you couldn't see that. I mean, even here's the thing: even if we disagree mm-hmm. with Timicin's point of view and their cultural point of view. Mm-hmm. He's making as strong an argument as he can for why it works for them, and probably more importantly, why it's nobody else's business what it is that works for them. So while we may reserve the right to be horrified and not think that it's for us, mm-hmm. it's something that clearly has worked for them. Well, there are a couple of things that I wonder about. I mean, you say it's work for them. I mean, what was Lwaxana's response to that whole thing? You eliminated the problem by eliminating the people, mm-hmm. or you got rid of the problem by getting rid of the people. You asked, did they try to do any better? And the answer is no, they didn't try to do any better, but they're also alleviated from having to try to do any better. Now, I'm not saying mm-hmm. whether that's right or wrong, but there is no better at that point. They've settled on their solution. They're not going to suddenly try to find a way to make it so that somebody can keep their faculties until they're 120. Hey, robot bodies for everybody. What do you say? Mm-hmm. No, they don't care because once you get to 60, you're done. Right? Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm honestly not arguing here whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. You raised an interesting question earlier, and I said we should actually do it in this segment. Does Lwaxana expect to be repaid for the love that she has shown Deanna? Yeah. That's that's honestly a really good question. There's you come across people who say, well, what can you do? They're your dad. Or what can you do? Mm-hmm. They're your mom. And I, having been raised by a single mom since I was 2, think there's plenty you can do. I think there's plenty mm-hmm. of questions you can ask yourself. You're going to be repaid for the amount of love that was shown. Well, I guess I finished 45 years ago then. Mm-hmm. There are so many different things that go into this. I mean, it does seem horribly cruel. It seems needlessly cruel. At the same time, you do have to wonder about what was sort of what came before with these people. That's not to say that I'm done with my dad, by the way. It's just to say, there are questions that there's plenty more than just being born, I think. Sure. I got to ask a question, too, about the tenuousness of these societies. Mm-hmm. You talked about Sarek. I couldn't help thinking of First Contact. We, as a society, have an idea, say the people of Kalan 2. And then mm-hmm. one of the people of Kalan 2 says, well, I have a different idea. And then the whole planet gathers around them, angrily shouting, Kalan 2! Kalan 2! Kalan 2! Until the voice of dissent is drowned out. How right or righteous can your ideas be if they cannot broach questioning? If you can't even ask about it without people saying, oh, you know what, Timicin, I'm thinking what you should do is shut up. And to make sure you do,
warship to the left of you, warship to the right of you. Now come on down and have a party.
Yeah. They're forcing the cultural norm down his throat.
A little bit.
That's it's really sad. And you know, in the Star Trek tradition, we want to see the guy who's the revolutionary. We want to see the guy who can turn the culture around by pulling the plug on the, you know, evil computer that's running the society. But that's not the case here. It's not going to be the case. And I doubt that Timicin's daughter is really going to pick up the mantle after he's gone and think, you know, that last conversation that I had with my father, he might have been on to something. You know, I don't think that's him. And I expect by the way that you're phrasing this, you know, there aren't editorials in the Kaylon 2 newspapers that are saying, it's been 15 centuries. Maybe it's time for a change.
Yeah. That does not seem to be happening there. Oddly enough, I find myself liking the people on First Contact a bit more because at least they let what's her name leave the planet. Because all Timicin wanted to do, he's like, fine, you don't want me? Great. Yeah. See you later. No, and they're like, no, really, come back because you have to want to die now.
Yeah, it really stifles dissent in a creepy authoritarian way.
Generally speaking, not an issue, though, because you don't talk to anybody off the planet.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, because, you know, God forbid a dissenting idea comes from the outside. Right. And then other people start to talk about that idea and have that idea on their own, too.
Which reminds me, by the way, I meant to ask this last segment. How does Lwaxana get back off the planet?
Oh, yeah.
So she beams down and Picard's like, okay, so we just wait here then?
Right.
Mr. Data, fly casual.
Right. Nice. There's something oddly to admire about the people of Kaylon 2, though. I mean, regardless of the structure that maintains this position that they have, they're able to face their own mortality with rationality and resolve. I don't think we would be good at it.
Sorry.
What, you don't think so?
No, I don't think so. I agree. I agree with Lwaxana at this point. I don't think there is an easy solution to any of this stuff, but how do they face their mortality? By just hastening it. I mean, they don't really face what happens as you grow old. They make sure that you don't.
Well, but it seems like, because I started to think about, you know, what is this from Timicin's point of view? You know, he talks to Lwaxana about his resolution with regret. There is regret in his voice after he's met her. Yes. You know, and after he's figured out, there's this new thing here. But for people who don't share anything with outsiders, is it because they know this is a weird thing?
Yes.
That they do? Or is it because he individually feels regret and anxiety about it? And if him, then what about others? I really did wonder that because... obviously, again, this is fiction. This is Star Trek. Everything that we see in an alien race is sort of a reflection of or a part of us. They're not real, so we can't judge their culture entirely and say, well, this is how they behave because they're a made-up thing. You know, but clearly people are deeply invested in this as their life process. When we meet his daughter, I feel like it would have been a big problem if we hadn't met his daughter. But when we meet her, her position on this, I feel like, is genuine. And sure, we could chalk it up to say, well, she's half his age. She's got a long time before she has to face this herself. But her reaction is genuine. Her feeling about this is genuine. And she's terrified at the prospect that he wouldn't go through with this process.
Yeah.
If we try to make this from the human perspective, then yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot you can say about it. I think that with us knowing the details of our own demise, or rather not knowing, is what keeps us from acting out in horrible ways or walking around with constant dread. You know, I think humans are very different from the people of Kaylon 2, at least in that respect. At the same time, we see Timicin deny himself the pleasures of life very often, and I wonder if that's sort of something built into the psychology of what it means to be from Kaylon 2. Yes, he's preoccupied with work, but he sadly cuts himself off from a potential romance with Lwaxana earlier in the show, not later. because he knows where he is headed and how she will react. So he's sort of protecting her by also protecting himself from the very idea of falling in love with her.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there are a number of things that I would say. First of all, I think the people of Kaelon 2 do understand that this would be seen as reprehensible by people outside, because when Batardet talks to Picard and Riker, he doesn't say, thank you very much for all your time. What? Timicin work on it? No. Timicin will be dead in 4 days. Mm-hmm. I mean, he says he has matters that he needs to attend to here. I mean, because he knows how it's going to be perceived or received. Mm-hmm. As far as what was the last thing you said about Lwaxana? I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep track of both of them, and I can't.
Oh, sure. Well, just meaning that he's... something in his actions is there to protect her.
Right. Yes. I don't think he's denying himself that pleasure as much as he doesn't want to put her through the pain of losing him or someone. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe he just doesn't want the negative reaction of, oh, man, she's going to think we're a weird death cult, isn't she? Maybe I shouldn't tell her. Right. I think it also just had to do with, he doesn't want to set her up for potential heartbreak. Mm-hmm. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. That is sort of assuming a lot about yourself. Like, oh, no, she would totally be in love with me in 4 days. I better not do anything. I have a question for you.
Sure.
What do you make of Lwaxana's argument that maybe it's time for Kaelon 2 to go? And I guess it sort of goes to what you were talking about with Dara as well, with the Michelle Forbes character. Mm-hmm. I wonder whether the resolution is a spiritual thing at all, like at any core, or have people just put a layer of spirituality over something that's really about resources? Otherwise, it seems like they would be like, hey, look, it's the big resolution.
Right.
We always knew this day would come. It had to come it comes for all of us sometime, and now it's coming for all of us all at once. I mean, there's no interest in merging with the infinite. There's no interest in going to the great beyond. There's no interest in resting because it's going to get everybody. I'm nowhere near 60. Let's stop this right now. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I would think that there would be enough young parents on the planet, mm-hmm. probably people who are not approaching their 60th birthday, and people who probably have small children who would think, well, this is not a fair part of the bargain then for me. Those younger people would be the ones who would want to, leave Kaelon 2. Maybe they're not quite as dug in as Timicin to say, well, we can't because we can't. This is home. Mm-hmm. I would think that there would have to be enough of that voice of dissent for that, even if they maintain the tradition that they have of, offing themselves at 60 years old. I would think that they would look at this outside threat as being exactly that, an outside threat. I think Lwaxana is sort of using that as, taking his argument to a logical extreme and hoping that he would back down. But he didn't. So there's that. Politically, I thought this episode raised some interesting questions about suicide, right to die. There is something about that for Kaelon 2, for people on Kaelon 2, the culture says that, well, you're not dying, you're not even ill. We just want to prevent the idea that you would suffer. We want to prevent the idea that you would be ill. I listened to a really good interview not that long ago with Sam Harris, who I've mentioned on our show before. He's talking about a similar topic. He posited that, he said, okay, if an alien showed up and put everyone on Earth to death silently, compassionately, when people were sleeping, didn't know, then how really do we judge the moral harm in how it's done? The harm, and the thing that we see that we would find repugnant is that it wipes out potential. And I thought I really got that. It's not the idea that from, say, the aliens' point of view, they look at Earth and they say, well, these people are bound to suffer. They get past a certain age, and then disease creeps in and dementia creeps in and their bodies fail them. So we're going to do the merciful thing, and we're going to put them to death before they have to suffer those indignities. But we look at that from our point of view and say, hey, well, there's actually a world of potential there, because the potential is that people who get older may actually not suffer all of those indignities. They may not see it as suffering at all. They may just see it as a part of their lives. And they may actually be able to accomplish different things, but actually accomplish things that they hadn't otherwise thought of.
While the citizens of Kalon 2 may not be allowed to do so, it is time now for us to figure out whether this episode, Half a Life, stands the test of time.
I'd say that's about 4/5 of an episode of Half a Life, John.
we didn't do the whole life.
No.
Yet.
Well, no.
We're getting there.
But I mean, just the amount of the show that we've done. I'm guessing 4/5. Could be 2/3. Sometimes this segment surprises. Let's find out if it does today. Time for the part where we discuss the messages, morals, and meanings of the episode and try to figure out whether the whole episode stands the test of time. Start with that one, John. Does this episode hold up?
Well, what I love about this episode is that all the arguments on all sides are well thought out and reasonable, even if it's an unreasonable argument. You know?
Yeah.
This show plays with our emotions in a great way. This is another one of those great stories where I feel like we could just take any single moment, any line, and do a whole show about that. We've scratched the surface here. And there will be other people in our audience who take away something different. And again, just like last week, that's awesome. You know, if we didn't hit the topic that means something to you, well, it just means there's so much more to mine out of this show. So I think that's one of the reasons this holds up quite well. And you and I have given a lot of crap to the character of Lwaxana Troi.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that this episode excuses those other episodes, but this goes a long way to add dimension to that character.
Yes.
She's really out of line bringing lunch to engineering. This is a workplace. The guy's star is dying. He has work to do.
Yeah.
For all the good things we say about Lwaxana, it seems like she only gains sympathy in this when it's something directly affecting her, not actually that she wraps her mind around what is happening to Timicin or his people. But you know what? The fact that she gained that sympathy and gained that empathy, at least she got it, and that changed the character. That's great. I think it's fantastic, and it's a big, big leap for her. You know, and last week, just comparing this to the Drumhead again, I said that was one that didn't work for me for immediate rewatch. Again, not to slight that episode at all. It's just that I think my viewing habits with it would be different from my viewing habits with other episodes. This one holds up for immediate rewatch, and that's mostly because of David Ogden Stiers. The subtleties in his character reveal so much when you know the rest of the story. When you've watched to the end and you know where this is headed, and then you go back and rewatch it, every single moment, every line that he has is playing the subtext of where that character is headed. And it's great. So this was a pleasure to watch over and over again. Not a pleasure because it was fun and light entertainment. It is nowhere near that. It is heartbreaking to get to the end of this episode. But they play the emotions right, and they play the characters just right. So this one definitely goes way, way up there. I think it holds up beautifully. May not be able to watch it again right away, but I definitely will rewatch this episode. What about you?
Yeah, everything you just said. I mean, seriously, I don't mean I'm not trying to be, flip about it.
Yeah,
we get a more nuanced Lwaxana in this. David Ogden Stiers, whichever. I mean, just amazing. It honestly makes me want to go back and watch MASH. Because, I mean, he was always sort of the straight man to, the wackiness that was Hawkeye and BJ, right?
Yeah.
I do remember there were a couple of episodes, though, that I do remember that coming through in particular. But it's seriously, I have not watched MASH regularly probably since the early to mid 90s in reruns. So I'd have to go back and really, pick some of those out. But yeah, his acting in this is just absolutely amazing. The fact that it does give you so much stuff to think about, if you're not going to be set in your ways on it, I guess would be the best way to put it. If you're not going to stand around and shout Kalon 2, but actually consider what everybody's saying here, there is a lot to be considered here.
Yeah.
And that part is absolutely fascinating to me. There were no bad effects. There was no bad makeup. Although he did look like he was bursting out of his skin,
right,
at the forehead. But otherwise, I mean, probably the biggest fault you could have, and I didn't even notice it because I'm so taken with everything else that's going on in the episode. You're right. Is the part about Data going, oh, yes, the use of sustenance has actually been found to, okay, shut up.
Knock it off.
Yeah. Yep. But I mean, seriously, that's probably the one thing that you can point to as far as production or writing on this that rings false. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it way stands up. If for no other reason, he's giving an acting class. It's amazing. Yeah, right. It's amazing to see that kind of acting on TV. Almost 30 years ago as we record this.
Yeah.
What about messages?
Well, I mean, I think this is kind of an interesting, tricky thing. It's one of those episodes where maybe we come to the end and we say there's not a you see Timicin moment.
Oh, there's a you see Timicin moment. He just doesn't necessarily follow it.
Right. But that's okay. It's maybe not totally necessary. This is a character study. This is a relationship study. There's all this other stuff going on. This episode asks us some good questions about cultural relativism. It's easy to judge other cultures, as Lwaxana does, but it's also easy to make assumptions within your own culture about how others should live, like Dara. This is sort of positing these two opposing ends together and just saying, okay, who are we going to respect more out of this? Even if we disagree. So I think that's an interesting kind of exercise to go through with this episode. And there's another thread here that I really like, that Timicin has the opportunity to be a revolutionary, and he can't fully become that. But maybe he planted a seed that will require others to become revolutionaries. Maybe.
Okay.
No?
Well, I got the same problem. Honestly, I have the same problem with this episode that I had with First Contact. I feel like the conservative mindset, and I don't mean conservative versus liberal. I mean the one that can't fathom change, wins. They're willing to go to war with Starfleet and with the Federation to keep this guy from breaking their social norms.
Yep.
I mean, that really is what they're risking at that point. And I wanted Timicin to, and I love the fact that Picard's like, hey, you're not just doing this because of us, are you? Because we got shields, we got lasers, we got photon torpedoes, we can take care of this. And he says, no, it's not that. It's a whole lot more than that. I want the revolutionary to be the revolutionary. I mean, yes, I feel for this guy. I feel for this character, and it's a wonderful bit of storytelling. But I go back to, I can't remember. There was an episode where I said, if we can't even in our fiction, fathom the idea. I think maybe when we were talking about money, when I was like, if we can't even fathom in our fiction the idea of a society without money, then I don't see how we get past all of the stuff that holds us back currently. I'm kind of bummed. I mean, this is the second time this season that we've had a great episode, but in the end, it's like, progress. That's for other people. We're fine here. I mean, maybe if I even had that moment, like the alternate universe Spock, the Dark Mirror Spock, or the Mirror Spock, saying, I'll think about what you said. And maybe if we just even had that, if we had Dara like wavering a tiny bit, but saying she just couldn't, and that was killing her. Yeah. And then maybe Timicin goes back for her, maybe if we had seen any kind of anything, when she sits there in front of him and says, I'm ashamed of you. You know what I honestly thought of? I thought of the stories that you hear about 60, 70-year-old men or women, or 50 or 60-year-old men or women, when their kid finally goes off to college, comes out. I was this thing when I was raising you your whole life. And somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't really that thing, but I wanted to take care of you. But now you're old enough to take care of yourself. So let me tell you what I'm thinking these days. Do you know what I mean? Or let me tell you who I actually am. And for her to then say, oh, I hate you. She doesn't say she hates him, but she's like, I am ashamed of you. You have now brought shame on me, because look at you with your thinking different, or with your acting ways that I don't expect you to act at this point. Right. I mean, honestly, and the whole thing is not undone by it. And I think the only reason it wasn't undone by it, because I think you remember First Contact really upset me at the end. Yeah. This upsets me, but the power of the performance is actually still what saves it. I mean, it's heartbreaking and it's sad. Made me cry.
Yeah.
Made me cry doing the recap. But it's that part of the whole messaging side of it. If there is I don't think that was a message. I'm sort of sad though that the end result is the same as the one that we saw about a month ago, where it's just like, progress, maybe.
Well, I'll be slightly more optimistic then.
Okay.
And say that, he was not able to change Dara's mind with a conversation. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I think Dara is so deeply invested in this that at least for a very long time, this is probably not something that she will revisit. But maybe on her, 59th and a half year, as she's getting closer and closer to his 60th birthday, she might remember that her father was the one who, for a moment at least, considered doing something else. And maybe Batarat, he's the guy who launched ships to try to go get this one person back. But if there's somebody else in his administration that says, you know what, maybe that was a waste of resource.
That was a tiny bit extreme, Batarat.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
That's really what it takes. So he may have chickened out in a way that we wouldn't want to see, really. We would want him to stay and get asylum, and we would want him to get away in the Enterprise the same way that the woman from First Contact did. By the way, where is she during all of this?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But there is something there that says that at least he gave it a passing chance. And his loyalties to his culture outweighed his desire to change that. And that's unfortunate, but that's him. That's his decision. That wasn't our decision to make. But we can look at that and say, you know what, some values maybe are overrated. The value that, like I said earlier, this culture fetishizes death. And maybe we can look at that objectively and say, that's a value that's out of whack. And maybe they don't want to have the conversation now, but in another 40 years, when their sun is closer and closer and closer to extinguishing itself, maybe we can get that conversation another chance. And maybe we can show them, hey, we've got people living well beyond 60 who can do great things like become admirals and commodores and go from ship to ship, annoying crews.
I will give Kaelan 2 one bit of credit. It's their science minister who commands the warships. Now, of course,
it sure is. Yeah.
Absolute power maybe corrupts absolutely. He was quick to reach the warship, so maybe that's not the best thing. But there is something that you can say for them.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, executive producer Rod Roddenberry. You can find out more at roddenberry.com. Please check out roddenberry.com, where you can find links to the Roddenberry Foundation, you can find the Roddenberry Shop, and you can find a lot of the other creative endeavors that Roddenberry is behind. For more exciting Star Trek podcasts, check out Trek FM, that's trek.fm. And for the latest in Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
Next week, the showstest with the mostest, the host.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. This show makes me want a full-on crossover episode of MASH and Next Gen. Fan filmers, get to work on that. And transmission.